Bill, perhaps you can tell us, I mean, about the blog. We'll go back to the blog for a moment. How much of your time is committed to that? Because it's quite a comprehensive blog, and it's been going a while. Is that something that's a part-time gig for you, like an evening chore? What's the routine around that?
Evenings, maybe mornings before work kind of thing.
Hmm.
It's my hobby. I also play golf, so it's like, it's something I do on the side basically. And, maybe get a little time in the middle of the day if I can, like on the lunch hour. It's primarily news. I do mix in some commentary here and there, but I just, but in a lot of cases, I'm trying to get something out really quick. Like the other day, as we record this, the Amazon announced its deal with MGM had closed. So I mean, I just wanted to get something really basic and quick out, and then later in the day, I had a chance to think about it, about some of the implications. So I did a follow up, but
Mm.
it the exact approach kind of depends on the situation. What I usually, if it's big news like that, I like to like put out something quick and then later come back with a more reflective follow up.
So, I mean, that's another thing I was going to ask you. Where do you get your news around all this? Because you're really into the minutia. Like you watch the credits right to the end. I know you do. You know who owns like the films and the distributors. So, kind of where do you go to get all those nuggets?
I use Twitter. I follow certain things like the major entertainment news sites, so I know if something's breaking because they use Twitter as kind of like their headline service
Mm.
and put links to their stories on the subject. Um, and some of it's just reading stuff over the years, and like I mentioned earlier, how they had asked Jack Lord back. What my source on that was, back in '83, when I was much younger, there was this publication here in the States called Starlog, which started out as a science fiction thing, but they started doing Bond stuff too. And so they had a special Bond issue because that was the year you were having two Bond movies come out. And so one of the articles was they did a feature on Richard Maybaum. So this writer interviewed him, and Maybaum was the one who let the cat out of the bag about, yeah, they asked Jack Lord back. He just wanted too much money. There were also some other interesting nuggets in that piece. Maybaum didn't come out and say it bluntly, but I got, reading between the lines of some of his quotes, I got the feeling he was definitely in the Sean camp, and he was like not necessarily the biggest Roger Moore fan. And I can't remember an exact quote off the top of my head, but just reading the whole article, I definitely got that sense.
Mm. Yeah, the reading element. I know it sounds a bit arcane, but I become a bit of a Bond bibliophile, if that's the word. I'm now
Hmm.
going. I mean, in fact, this was one of my first meetings with AJ. I remember it very specifically because we were getting together a presentation for a publisher, and we needed AJ, or we asked AJ to go over the pitch and get his his 5p's worth. And so he went through it with a very fine tooth comb, pretty much crossed it all out and ripped up pieces. He even gave us the title for our book, From Tailors With Love, which was all down to
Mm.
AJ. But he gave me about 10 books to go, you got to read these books before you do anything else. And it was it was one of the best things that Matt who co-authored the
Matt
book,
Spazer.
actually, yeah,
Yeah.
it was one of the best meetings that I'd ever had, because even though it was rough, it was brutal. It was
Yeah.
exactly what we needed. And since then, I've become something of a bit of a nerd. I get up at you know 5:30 and just read for half an hour, because it's probably the only time of the day that I'll do it. But to Chris, on that point, some of these things that we've been talking about today, like what James Pearson said about Ian Fleming, and there's bits in there about his tailor, about how he'd go to Turnbull and Nasser and he would get his shirts. I mean, that wouldn't be on any other blog. That's not anywhere. It's just in a very, very old book, in a biography that was written near 60 years ago. So it's these kind of gems that you find by trawling that stuff.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, a lot of Bond fans say, their bucket list, I want to go to GoldenEye in Jamaica and
Mm.
stay there. My thing on my bucket list, which I had intended to do before the pandemic and I still haven't done, is to go to Iowa City, Iowa, because that's where Maybaum's papers are. He
Ah.
graduated from the University of Iowa in 1931, and so he donated all his papers. So there's like all these scripts, not just the final scripts, but drafts of scripts, memos, and things like that. And I would love to be able to spend a day, at least a day, checking that out,
Do you own
because
any?
I have some photocopies of some scripts, and some are what are supposed to be final drafts, and some are like preliminary drafts. A friend of mine, he was a Bond collector. He auctioned it off because he's about 70, and he kind of got me onto scripts because he kept telling me about the Moonraker first draft. He said, it's got this, it's got that, it's got jetpack. I said, jetpack? So I finally said, listen, can you make a copy of this? I've got to see this. So like the next time I saw him, this was in New York, he showed up with 4 scripts. He said, oh, I made some more copies of some others. So I was like, thing was I was flying back and I had only brought a carry-on with me. So I took some doing to cram those 4 scripts in my carry-on bag with all my clothes and stuff. But I managed it, and that kind of turned me on to it. So I've written stories about individual scripts. So even where it's like it says shooting script, like this is like the final script supposedly, sometimes there are some major differences between that and what we got in the final film. Like, for example, with Live and Let Die, the New Orleans airport sequence was much more evolved. I'm guessing that some of this probably may have fell out because they had to cut. They couldn't afford what was being described, because the whole thing with Mrs. Bell was more involved. He ends up, Bond like crashes the plane into a fence, for example, and she's like hanging upside down. She's unconscious. She had fainted some time back. so she's hanging upside down, strapped into her seat. And the ending was different. The ending, well, also in this script, Rosie was white. I think this was before I think Mankiewicz was still kind of lobbying to have Solitaire be black, and Rosie was white. And she dies in a different way than she does in the movie. And at the very end, there's no Baron Samedi on the train. Instead, the last shot is of this sign, and it says no entry, and there's a flashing red light, and suddenly the sign changes to proceed or something like that with a flashing green light, which is, I assume, is supposed to be symbolic of the sexual act.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
But yeah, reading it, I was thinking, hey, this. I wonder if Mankiewicz was inspired by the ending of North by Northwest with that train going into the tunnel.
Or Naked Gun, where you have the rocket going off in space when he's having sex,
Yeah.
and then they're like all those drills that are searching for oil.
And I've got what it says. It's a shooting script for On Her Majesty's Secret Service, but it's fairly well known that there was at least a foot chase that was at least partially filmed for that didn't make the film. But there's more than that, even, because Bond catches the guy, he kills him. The guy was getting ready to send a telegram to Blofeld, and Bond changes the telegram message and then sends it. But then it's like, well, won't Blofeld get suspicious if his man got killed? Oh yeah, well, we better stage something. So he stayed, with Q's help. He stages this thing where the guy's body is in this rail car with a bunch of other dead bodies, and they end up staging a train wreck. So like, oh, that explains how so and so died, and this would have now. It's very weird to read this. And I guess, well, first of all, it probably would have had at least 10 minutes to an already long movie.
Yeah.
And they ended up not doing it, not going through with it.
Did they film it?
Well, I don't know, but in the finished film, if you look carefully, there's Bond's fellow agent. He's reading a newspaper in Switzerland, and there's a headline on the front page that refers to this train wreck. So that's the one remnant in the movie. Now, did they actually film the train wreck part? I don't know. But
Interesting. I'll have to get John
yeah,
Glenn on the blower. Let's see if he would have been. Yeah, he would have been there because he's second unit
he was
director up the
second
mountain
unit.
up there. Yeah, that's right.